We're moving on now to Wiles' study. Okay, so this is still about therapies for depression, and this is now a named study in the specification. So that will mean that I will expect you to add it to your case study sheet. If your case study sheet is not up to date, can you please make sure that it is? It will be such a useful revision tool for you once we have finished. And this is our last named study. So you should have 14. Alright, if we look at our PowerPoint then, you will see there is a research methods link asking you to design a study to test some ideas and then justifying your answers. I would suggest you might want to come back to that at a later stage because we need to move on fairly rapidly. Alright, then we've got our lesson objectives. And then we are going on to Wiles' study. Okay, there is a quick breakdown of him and some questions there that you might anticipate before you read the study. However, let's look at page 232. So here we have the Necker cube again. There was a group of psychologists in Germany in the early part of the 19th century who called themselves Gestalt Psychologists. The word Gestalten means the whole in German. The Gestalt psychologists were interested in how we perceived whole objects. The perception of the Necker cube above relies on the whole image. If you look at the individual parts, you do not see the cube. Gestalt psychologists coined the phrase, the whole is other than the sum of its parts. Their view was that we can only make sense of the world through a consideration of the whole rather than the individual elements. This is holism. All right, now we've talked before about this idea that if you give somebody drugs because they are depressed, that may deal with one area that is problematic. Okay, but if you have CBT, then you are helping that person to control what is going on, even if they seem to have recovered, but they then go into a depressive state at a later state, they should still be able to deal with it. All right, so we need to think about everything that goes with it. What was the trigger that led to this point? And does that need to be dealt with as well? So this is the type of thing we're looking at. All right, so this is Wiles' study. Depression is a major health issue and antidepressant medication is usually the first choice of treatment. However, it's not always effective. In fact, only about 30% of patients with depression respond fully to antidepressant medication. The remaining 70% are described as treatment resistant. Given the large number of people who are treatment resistant, it is important to find an alternative therapy. Cognitive behavior therapy may be the answer, or at least CBT plus antidepressant medication. Using CBT and mediation, is a more, I think that should be medication, is a more holistic approach to treating depression as it concerned with the whole person. I think they were getting tired as they were getting towards the end of this book. So A, there is evidence that treatment-resistant patients do improve when receiving a combination of antidepressant medication plus CBT. To test this, Nicola Wiles et al. Set up the Cobalt trial with the aim of further investigating the benefit of this holistic approach, CBT plus antidepressant medication, for treating people with treatment-resistant depression compared to using antidepressant treatment alone. Cobalt stands for Cognitive Behavior Therapy as an adjunct to medication for treatment-resistant depression. Catchy title. The method was, the study recruited 469 participants from Bristol, Exeter and Glasgow, belonging to 73 different GP practices. All patients had treatment-resistant depression. They had all been taking antidepressant medication for more than 6 weeks and still showed symptoms of clinical depression. This meant a BDI score of more than 14. The BDI is the Beck Depression Inventory, which measures the symptoms of depression. We mentioned Aaron Beck on page 226. Patients were randomly assigned to one of two conditions using the computer-generated code: usual care, antidepressant only, or usual care plus CBT. CBT involved 12 to 18 sessions of about an hour given by a CBT therapist. Improvement was assessed by measuring symptoms of depression using the BDI. Results: at the end of 6 months, 422 participants, 90%, remained in the study. Usual care, 21.6%, had more than 50% reduction in symptoms. Usual care plus CBT, 46.1%, had more than a 50% reduction. At the end of 12 months, 396 participants, 84%, remained in the study. Those in usual care and CBT continued to show much greater levels of recovery and a greater chance of remission, i.e. their symptoms did not return. Conclusion: amongst patients who did not respond to antidepressants, CBT is a useful addition to treatment. CBT plus antidepressant medication is more effective in reducing depressive symptoms than antidepressant medication alone. The results suggest that these benefits can be maintained over 12 months. All right, so that's the study, okay? And that makes sense. This is a holistic approach. Therefore, you're not just using one or the other therapy, you are combining the two. Okay, so Nicola Wiles is a reader in epidemiology at the University of Bristol. Epidemiology is a fascinating field of research where you look for patterns in diseases, such as the geographical location of outbreaks of disease. Doctors then use the patterns to better understand and control disease. Nicola has a particular interest in treatment-resistant depression. Okay, so here's the evaluation of Wiles' study. Okay, 2 positives and a negative. First one strength of this study is that it was very carefully designed to control extraneous variables. One potential extraneous variable was participant differences in the 2 conditions, because this was an independent group's design, usual care group and usual care plus CBT. It could be that the patients in the usual care group happened to be the ones who were more depressed. To ensure this didn't happen, participants were randomly assigned to groups, so there should be no difference. In addition, the initial BDI scores for both groups were checked to see that on average they were similar. Furthermore, in the final analysis, the figure for comparison was amount of improvement rather than actual level of depression. This means that we can conclude with confidence that changes in the dependent variable, reduction in symptoms, were not affected by a key potential extraneous variable. All right, so it is the design of this experiment which is really important here. Okay, so now they could have used grouped pairs as well to help with making sure that they had similar levels of depression, if you like. Okay, but of course there are certain extraneous variables that would be very difficult to take away from this. So a negative is that one weakness is the use of self-report methods to determine levels of depression. To be fair, it is difficult to assess levels of depression in any other way. However, the use of self-report means that participants have to make subjective judgments and may also not answer statements truthfully. For example, this is one question on the BDI. A person has to tick one answer. I do not feel sad. I feel sad. I am sad all of the time and I can't snap out of it. I am so sad or unhappy that I can't stand it. Some people might underestimate how sad they feel, and others might overestimate. This questions the validity of the information collected about depression. All right, make sure we remember the difference between validity and reliability. Okay, so here we are looking at, is the information actually answering what we are looking for in our hypothesis and what we are experimenting with? It is very difficult to judge what is that level of depression, right? And if we're not looking at any other external factors that could have affected it, then that could be an issue too, okay? Because let's say, for example, the person remains in a toxic environment, that could be affecting their depression levels. Finally, as a positive point, one strength is that it is focused on developing a useful therapy, so it has a real-world application. The main aim of this research was to demonstrate in a well-controlled study that a combined, more holistic approach to treating depression can be successful, more successful than antidepressant medication alone, which fails 2/3 of the people with depression. Moreover, the therapy was clearly cheap at just £343 per year on average. This is equivalent to the cost of some antidepressant medications for a year, though others are considerably cheaper. You can look that up. Such real-world usefulness is one of the main reasons for conducting research. All right, so then it is this idea that we're not just saying, oh, well, that's nice, that happens. You can actually use this and use this combination theory in what's going on. So, the stretch and challenge. In a further study, Wiles et al. Contacted the original participants on average 3.5 years after therapy had ended. A total of 248 individuals returned the BDI that was sent to them. A higher score on the BDI means more symptoms of depression. In the usual care, the BDI score was 23.4. In the usual care plus CBT, it was 19.2. The scores suggest that the additional CBT treatment continued to have a more beneficial effect over time than antidepressant medication alone. However, both scores of 19 and 23 indicate moderate depression. It is interesting to note that the average annual cost of CBT per year per client was £343. The average duration of treatment was 6 months, i.e. quite cheap and not for long. Okay, there is a study tip here. You don't need to remember all of the numerical results of a study. For example, in Wiles' study, it is okay to just remember the gist of the results as opposed to the actual percentages. So remembering that just over twice as many as the usual care plus CBT had a 50% reduction in their symptoms in comparison to the usual care group is enough. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, there are some ideas for how you can structure writing up this experiment, and then there are some extension questions to get you thinking about it. If, as we normally do, you just want to write this out in less than 200 words, then please feel free to do that. Okay, but there are some scaffolding measures here to help you look at the evaluation of the points, and you might want to incorporate that into what you write. And there's some examples of what you can write in there. Okay, then there's an extension task on looking at placebo effects, and then an exam tip. Saying, yes, if you're looking at the ethics of a research method, make sure that you actually state what the ethical issues are, not just say there are some. Okay, there is an exam type question. Evaluate Wiles' study of the effectiveness of CBT for 5 marks. And there is also an explanation of it. Oh, now you will notice that somehow I have not written on here complete the apply it research and complete the check it from page 233. I would like you to do that. I will add a slide now that says that, and I would also like you to be looking back at research methods and doing something from there as well. I think you're on page 111, so that would suggest you want to go on to page 113 next, which I'm just looking at. Yes, there is one on deprived sleep on there that you could be doing if you haven't done it already. Or you could look at 115, which is on reliability and validity. So that would be quite useful to match with this. I thought there was something else I was going to say to you, but maybe I'm not. Yes, remember your case study sheet. That also needs to be completed. 10 words. As a maximum, as many pictures, symbols, numbers as you want.